Welcome to Let's Talk Real Estate. Yeah. This is your December edition.
Yes, it is.
So we'll say early Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas is next Wednesday. And since we are a Christian television network, Jesus is the reason for the season, right? And so we can say Merry Christmas here. So Merry Christmas. And as you guys know, we gather once a month to talk about, this powerful asset class called real estate. And we're really circling around one question, and is this: how to use real estate as a wealth creation tool. So with that in mind, I'm your host, Dexter B. Jenkins. And what we do is we bring in a real estate professional to talk about how we do that. And so this month is no different. And so we have a special guest in from Rhode Island. I'm gonna let her introduce herself in a few seconds. But we just want to, as always, thank you guys for tuning in. As you tuned in for 11 a month, I think we did all of it. We started back end of 2023, and then we've had 12 full shows. We haven't taken the time off, and so thank you for your support and all that you do. Also, want to thank Eddie Jules for his support and allowing us to come in here and use the studio and all that. And so we don't want to, in this season of Thanksgiving and Christmas, we don't want to take that for granted. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Cheryl Galloway. As you guys know, when I talk about real estate, I always talk about there are a few things you want to do in order to be successful. Number one, you got to learn how to find deals. Number two, you got to learn how to fund deals. And then the last thing is you have to really have a monetization strategy. So whether it's a fix and flip, buy and hold, whatever. And as we did our show the last 2 months, we said that you need to have multiple money relationships. And so this woman has deep pockets, or she represents somebody who has deep pockets. And so without further ado, please welcome Cheryl Galloway to the, I'm about to say FCC stage. Let's Talk Real Estate stage. Yeah. Cheryl, thank you for coming in and spending the last show with us. I met Cheryl's husband, Steve, first. I went and spoke at their Bread of Life in Providence men's group, and then we sort of hit it off, and then he said, you need to meet my wife, which is good man. He said, meet my wife. And so then you guys came to the show, and so we've have known each other probably since then. And so look into that camera and tell the people who you are. What's your mama name? Which plan? Tell them who you are, who you represent, and what you do. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I am actually honored to be here to finish off 2024. Thank you, Pastor Dexter, for giving me a call. My name is Cheryl Galloway, and I am at Bristol County Savings Bank. I'm the AVP Community Development Officer, and I'm here to assist people who are interested in pursuing home ownership.
Question: What does AVP mean? To talk?
Assistant Vice President.
I thought that meant.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear you say that. Yeah. AVP. No, you got to say it. Assistant Vice. That means she doing big things, y'all. Well, let's start there, because I think, as we talk about home ownership and all that, one of the things I want to get into was really your story a little bit. How did you even get into this space? Because what I've learned, Cheryl, over we've probably been doing this real estate thing seriously probably the last 4 or 5 years, is there are so many different ways that you can make money in the industry. So whether you're actually doing the business like we do, or you are supporting it by lending. So how did you end up in that space?
So interesting. It's always important to be good to people. You just never know when someone's going to answer a prayer. So my husband and I got married in '98.
Okay.
We had several children, and I was looking for employment. At that time, I had a friend of mine, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn. Lynn Pham was a mortgage broker at that time,
right.
And she trained me.
Wow.
She literally took me under her wing back in 2005.
Okay.
Yeah, during that time.
Wow.
She trained me. We were in Malden and out of an office there. And then my husband and I moved to Rhode Island.
Okay.
And I just continued in the industry.
So from 2005 till now.
So there was a break.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there was a 10-year break.
Okay.
I left the industry in 2010. Went into education for 10 years.
That's right. You did say that.
Yep.
Keep talking about it.
So went into education for 10 years. I was a director of admissions at a charter school.
Okay.
In Providence, Rhode Island.
Right.
And the biggest reason for that was because not only was the mortgage industry shifting,
Big time.
But being Afro-Latina, the population of people who I dealt with were at home. This was before digital sign-in. This was before Zooms, before anything digital. So as I was at everybody else's home having amazing dinners, because we love to eat.
Yeah.
I said, we couldn't continue because, I was never at home.
Yeah.
So during that time, you had to like stack papers up, send it through the regular mail, the slow mail now. You had stack and order. You had to put it in different places, but everything needed to be signed in person. So I did a lot of great dinners at someone else's house. So I was always volunteering at my children's school, and a position opened. And then I was with them until my youngest graduated. He graduated in 2019 out of high school. So I say I'm part of the Great Resignation. The world shut down, COVID came, and then people wondered, okay, what's next?
What's next?
Right? So for me, my passion as, migrating to this country, I'm originally from Honduras, and was making sure that the community that I look like, I represented, and I was a part of, understood financial literacy, how to move forward. And I loved educating. So I said, why don't I just go back into the space that I loved? And I only left because I needed to take care of home first. My first ministry's home. So did that, and I said, okay, let me go back into it. And I ended up, studying, taking a mortgage test, and began with Guaranteed Rate. That was my first place as a processor. I said, let me begin in the background. So I can process the documents. It's been about 10 years. And I realized quickly, the industry is about people also. The documents and things like that, you can get that and online in so many different ways. But we were, heading to closings, loan officers are still not calling, realtors are still MIA. I was like, wow, the industry hasn't changed much in 10 years. So if you have a love for people, which I do, and I understand, I'm just passionate about making sure that, for our industry and a lot of the people that I serve, there is no starter home. Many of us, we buy a house
and
you stay there, and that becomes your grandparents and your great-grandparents' home. So it's, that's really a lot of times the largest purchase of someone's life. And you need someone that cares, and that means in caring that if the industry or something happens, you pick up the phone. I might not have all the answers, but sometimes the answer is, you know what, I don't have it right now, but I'll get back to you in a couple of days. And at least it lets the person know that, you really care. So that happened. I was processing, and literally I was like, oh no, let me take the test and go back into the industry. So here I am at Bristol County. And, just loving the bank. It's a community bank. They've been around for 176 years.
Well, talk to us about that, because I think a lot of times people really don't understand the difference between banks. So we know a large, say a Santander or Citizens, and then you may know your credit union, and then now we come down to, a community bank. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as a community bank, we, have a staff of maybe a couple of hundred people. It's not one of the larger banks, and what happens is they do have a charitable donation aspect of it. So a lot of, small business or nonprofit organizations are able to give. So this year, I think they're giving about $200 million to nonprofit organizations. But as a community bank also, their focus is within the community. So as a development, person in the community, that's really my role within the residential space to really discuss the different programs that we offer.
So does that mean, community means that strictly in Rhode Island, or how do you define community?
So Bristol County Savings can lend in Rhode Island and in Mass. But a lot of their branches the majority of them are within the Bristol County area. And, which is really the southern part of Mass. But right now they're also extending into Providence. So we just opened, so in Rhode Island, they have 3 branches, one in Pawtucket, one in Greenville, and another one is in Cumberland. And they just opened a lending center in Providence and looking to extend in Providence County, which is the purpose of why I came on board, because I live in Providence now. So I'm there to assist with that area.
So talk to us about, because one of the reasons I want to have you on is really getting people ready to purchase in 25. There's a lot of uncertainty.
There is.
And a lot of fear. And I was doing this is my second show that I was doing a podcast. I was a guest on this one, and we were talking about getting ready for 2025. And I was saying, how, in my opinion, it's really important for us to become aggressive in our wealth building, because you don't know what's coming down the line. You look at, and I'm being somewhat passionate tonight, y'all. I'm saying that you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, we talked about money is a defense. And a lot of times, because we don't have it, we're defenseless.
It's true.
We're defenseless. And so, one of the asset classes that really can help people accumulate wealth, both slow and fast, depending on what strategy you use, is this thing called real estate. So talk to us about what are some things people would need to do to get ready. So we can start with the residential side, and then, obviously many of us are investors. If you guys work with investors, or talk to us about that. But talk to us about, how should we be thinking about what's coming up, and how should we get ready for 2025?
So one of the things I think it's important is understanding your why.
Right.
So we all have a phone. We use it all the time. On my phone, I have a picture of my grandkids and my family, and then I have Proverbs 13, verse 22.
Oh, yes.
So really,
Preach.
And the reason for that is because that's my why, right? And so that scripture just talks about,
Exactly.
yeah, a wise man leaves an inheritance for your children's children,
Correct.
right? So that means your children are all set. And when we talk about inheritance, sometimes we might talk about the financial aspect of
Right.
it, but just the education,
Correct.
is an inheritance. Just sitting down to talk about financial understanding, credit cards, debt, all of that aspect. So the first thing I would say is definitely begin with your why.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because as you're on a path to try to focus, and that's the end result, there's going to be some areas of that you feel like, wow, I'm kind of in the wilderness.
Gotcha.
But your why will remind you of like, okay, just continue to take that step, right? So I always begin with that. Like, what is your purpose?
Right.
Because if you don't really have that, anytime a situation arises, it's easy to leave it.
And it's coming.
Yeah.
No, it's coming.
That part. No, it really
it's
is.
coming. It's coming.
It's coming. So with that, that's from a personal stance.
Okay.
But then one of the things that I always say is work on your credit. There's a site which is annualcreditreport.com.
Yep.
They offer, the 3 credit bureaus, which
Right.
is Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
Right.
You're able to get your credit report free once a year.
Right.
And that's important for your why. Whether we're talking about real estate, but I say to people, you need it at any point in
Just in
time,
general, yeah.
just in general.
Yeah.
This country, so a lot of, the population that I deal with is migrant families. And, in Honduras, which is where I'm from, everything is cash.
Yes.
You either have money and get things done, or you don't.
Okay.
So a lot of times people who migrate here have that same mindset.
Right.
You're like, cash is king, and it
It's
isn't.
out here.
It's credit.
No.
Credit is everything.
Oh my God.
Like when you're looking at homes, that's one area, but just to apply for rent,
Right.
to get a car,
Right.
to anything, literally, it's based on your credit.
Credit.
So it's always important because that's one of the challenges every time I sit down with someone. We have the
Yeah.
paperwork, and I explain to them that home ownership is a journey. I'm willing to take that, journey with you to the end result.
Okay.
But understanding that, not only do we look at credit, we also look at, what you make,
Okay.
that aspect of it. So I will ask for your pay stubs, your bank statements, and things of that nature because we're looking for some stability within income. And stability for us is typically within this 2 years within the same form of employment.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be the same
same
job
company, but
or the
the
same
same-
company, right? Just form of
industry.
employment.
Got it.
Yeah, so let's say, a lot of times I have CNAs and they work for different agencies, but
Right.
you have had the same, title basically within that time. And in addition to that, I look at 2 years of either tax returns or W-2s.
Okay.
But it all begins with credit, That other aspect we can work with. Let's say you have limited, one of the great things with the bank that I work at is they have put a program aside and put some money aside. The board decided and, the CEO of the company, they put actually up to, I think it's $5 million for down payment assistance. You know, you have to qualify based on
Right.
HUD income standards.
Right.
But even for them to do that is huge because
huge.
that helps a lot of people to be able to get over that hurdle
Correct.
of being able to get into a home. But literally, it begins. The first thing I always say is, let's start with your credit.
Right.
You know, and a lot of times people pull their credit and they don't realize that. Oops, there's a surprise.
There it is.
There is a surprise.
There it is.
Yeah. So what happens is it's part of the journey.
Right.
Right. So we can still get to the end result, but now we have to stay in this
Yeah.
place
Yeah.
where we have to deal with the credit first before we can even look at income, before we can look at anything. So what I do sometimes with buyers is I will put them, you know, on a monthly check to see like, okay, you have your homework assignment,
exactly.
you know? So I actually just met with a buyer this month, and I met with him in August.
Right.
So in August, he came, I explained, I wrote everything out that he needed to do. And then he showed up in December, and I was like, what happened to your homework? Like, we're on a journey, you know, you are the driver. We have an end goal, but I can't do anything. So, you know, we went through everything again. I wrote it out again.
Exactly.
I said, is this the like first time opening the folder since I gave it to you? He was like, yeah. I was like,
huh?
well, you know, there's nothing you can do. Your credit's still the same.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just going to disappear. It literally is a team effort
Right.
and teamwork.
Well, I think you said a lot where you start looking at, number one, and this is anything, why are you doing what you do?
Yeah,
You know,
it
and
really, and that aspect, the financial literacy aspect for our community is really big.
Huge.
We don't understand that concept. We don't understand. One of the big things that I think is a challenge for people is that 35% of your credit scoring is based on your accounts being paid on time.
Payment
Everybody
history,
knows that.
100%,
You know,
yeah.
everyone knows that your payments need to be made. But the other 30% of your points are based on the limit on your credit cards in
Right.
comparison to the balance.
Correct.
That is always a huge eye opener.
Right.
So if your limit on your card is $1,000, your balance should be, you know, to help your credit scoring, no more than $300.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, so sometimes people will come and say, you know what, Cheryl, I've paid everything on time. I'm like, yeah, but you got like 5 credit cards and they're all maxed.
Right.
You know, or a little bit over the max. So, you know, in order to move that, then we need to make some adjustments to be able to do that. So that part of it, I think a lot of people don't realize,
Right.
and that's always such a huge eye opener because they don't realize the weight of that information.
Right. Well, I think you said a number of things around the why, and then you talked about, you mentioned the word financial literacy tons
Yeah.
in the few minutes that you were talking. And there is a language of wealth. And there's a language of success that we're trying to teach people.
Correct.
You know, so you were talking about coming from a different country where they strictly cash. And I'm sort of old school. My dad was from the South, and so they had a saying, "Pay as you go, you never owe."
Absolutely.
Well, even though that sounds good, we're in a different day and time now. So you paying as you go, even though if you gave me $1 million in cash, I wouldn't turn it down.
Right.
But really, it really is all about, you know, credit and leveraging and learning how to do those type of things. And so what we've been taught as people, particularly I'm thinking people look like you and I, is that we've been taught to be afraid of credit and debt and so on and so forth. And so we haven't learned how to use
How to manage it.
how to manage it, and how to use it
Properly.
in a way that's going to help us to do what you talk about in Proverbs 13:22. A good man leaves an inheritance for his children's
Absolutely.
children. So all of this is a huge educational process that we have to take ourselves through, and then there's a renewing of our minds. There's a shifting of the paradigms that need to take place, and that doesn't happen overnight. So to your friend, okay, I was here 6 months ago. I was like, well, you didn't do your homework, so we got to go back A, B, C, D. We go
Correct.
back to the fundamentals because you didn't get it the first time. But you're really dealing with a paradigm, and those don't change very easily.
No, it doesn't. And what happens too is within that process, I think the biggest challenges too is that we live in a day and age where everything is instant.
Oh
right?
my God, yeah.
Like if you order something on Amazon, it used to take 2 days, but if you order it the
You
same
may
morning,
you may get it that afternoon in some
there
cases.
you go. You can get it the
Yeah.
afternoon.
In
We
some
live in a
cases.
day and age where people take a copy of a check and it's in your account.
Right.
You don't even have to go to the bank anymore. The
This
the
thing right here.
process,
Click, click.
yeah, literally, the process of finance. It's still there's
Ugh.
a team of about 15 to 20 people
Right.
who go through the process of it. And before I can even send you anywhere, it begins with me.
Okay.
But literally, it takes work and it takes time. So even as I'm speaking about the couple, the wife was like, "Well, how long is this going to take?" I said, "It's a process." And that really in this day and age where we have so much communication, it's over communicated. And a lot of people live off of TikTok, which is nothing wrong with it. But a lot of things that you
Wrong.
find online, there needs to be a comma.
Right.
It's like TikTok will say, buy this house and 5% down and exclamation, exclamation. It's like, it's not that easy.
No.
There's a process of all of it.
Yeah.
And then people will come in, and that's usually while I ask them, like, where did you get that information from?
Right.
So
I got it from
literally,
YouTube.
yeah, that's
Right.
exactly it.
I got
I
it
got it
from
from YouTube. I saw this TikTok clip,
Right.
or someone will send me a TikTok clip, and I'm like, okay, let's come in and talk about what this process looks like, because there's people on the other end of this. So literally, just think of the concept of what you're doing. You're looking at a home that's worth $500,000,
Right.
and you're asking someone that maybe you're putting 3% down.
Right.
That's $15,000, and then you want them to finance
The other
$485,000.
Right.
So as we're talking about like the finance, getting into things, sometimes we have to take a step back to think about what the process is.
Nugget there, girl.
Right? What the process
Yeah.
of what we're asking for. You are asking someone to lend you $400,000,
And
$500,000.
$85,000.
Hey,
Oh,
there you
God,
go.
yeah.
And you put a little bit
Yeah,
into it.
yeah.
So, when I say that, they're like, yeah, you're right.
Right. Yeah.
You're right, because it's such a, we live in such a day and age where everything is so quick.
Right.
We forget that there's a process for things.
Yeah, you said the word I was thinking, process.
Yeah, everything's a process,
yeah.
right?
And we don't
I
like
mean, when you
process a
talk
lot of
about
times.
just the scripture, right? I mean, God could have created the world in one day, right? But
it
there's a
wasn't.
reason why,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's a process for
Yeah,
everything on this earth. And at times, so technology is moving so quick,
Yes.
so fast, that we forget what the process looks
Right,
like.
right,
And certain things in life take a little bit
Yeah.
longer to
And
get
I
to.
think if you don't go through the process, because we just finished a flip a little while ago, and it's a $600,000 house that I think we closed it for like $615, and it was mom and daughter bought it. And I was thinking to myself, Lord, I hope they can keep this house.
That part.
Now, I wasn't in a business where I'm asking, all right, show me a number, because that wasn't my part of the
Right.
transaction. But my wife and I were talking about, because most times you're one job loss, somebody gets sick, anything can happen. So next thing you know, now you're on the hook for a $600,000 mortgage. Obviously, I think they put down 3.5 or so FHA, which we'll talk about in a
Correct.
second. And I'm like, Lord, I hope they can keep this house, because for us, it's not just about getting you something. I want to do what we're talking about here. We want to have this multi-generational
Yeah.
impact, where our kids are impacted off this. And so, I was like, oh, God. Anyway, all right. You and I got a whole conversation going on here. Let's open up the floor. Any questions out there thus far based off of anything we've talked about? I don't know who has the microphone. The highly esteemed Mrs. Jenkins has the... Any question? I don't even know if there's any question. We were just sort of chit-chatting and talking. You have a question for us? Okay. Well, if there's no
You just
question,
hold the
you
mic,
just hold
right?
it. All right. Okay. All right. So talk. There was a question back there. We need to have a question.
So you mentioned 30% on your credit, 30% on the credit cards. What's the other 40%? That's only 60%.
Right. So the other one has to do with longevity of credit, like how long have you had it? So I one of my first credit cards that I had, I think it was like a $200 limit, but I've had it for 20 something years.
Right.
And I don't even, I'll like use it like $1, $2 and pay it off. but it's because I've had it so long that
It
I
looks good on
refuse
your
to
credit.
get rid of
Yeah, it
it
looks good on your
because,
credit.
right, it shows
looks good.
longevity.
Yeah, it looks good.
So that's another thing. But I mentioned those because those are the highest, right, and the biggest.
Yeah. Yeah, that thing right there.
Because that's another part too. Some people just started their credit.
Yeah.
So they just start their credit history and they don't understand why, their credit score isn't, as high as it needs to be. And I'm like, you just began this year.
Right.
So over time, when you begin that and as you continue, then you will have that.
Right.
And one of the things too that we did for our children, and this is debatable. And I say that because, just to throw out that disclaimer, is when they were our children were, we have 3 sons, so when our children were in high school, we actually we added them as an authorized user on one of our highest cards. We don't use it, and if we do, it's minimal. And one of our sons, we keep it because he just is not there to use it yet. But with that, right, it's establishing that credit
Early,
for him
right.
early. And then that way that helps him when that point comes for him, he's able to make those
Right.
decisions and that credit is already established. So then we gave you a jump because
Right.
we didn't have that.
Correct.
So
That's a nugget that she just gave you guys there too. A serious nugget. So I don't know
yeah,
if you
and
guys
I don't
caught
say
that.
to give it to them. You can put them on as authorized user, and which one's a saver, which one's a spender, or someone's doing
Yeah.
DoorDash at your house all the time. Then that person. You can't give them that card.
Right.
They'll show up 3 times a day instead of once a day.
Oh, I was paying for it. It's all good.
Right, exactly. So, and that is a way that we've helped our sons, to move forward.
Right.
And as far as income is concerned, so if they're W-2 earners, they need to have the W-2s, but what if they have like a LLC or a business? How does that work? What would they need for that transaction?
That's a big one. So for anyone who's self-employed, one of the challenges and the biggest challenge that I often see is that people gross a certain amount of money as business owners. I'll sit down with someone and they made $150,000, $200,000 a year, but Uncle Sam only got $20,000 and everything was a write-off. So I say to them, your tax person did their job. They probably came back and said, you got to pay this amount, and you're like, can you give me
Write this
more
off.
write-offs?
Yeah, write this
Exactly.
off.
I need more write-offs. So they did what they needed to. Now what happens is on my end,
Yes.
I literally take what you have paid Uncle Sam, and that income is the income that I use to try to qualify you.
Right.
So as a business owner, I always say it's really important to speak to your CPA and let them know what your plans are.
Correct.
So that they will adjust and you will know what you need to do to be able to make sure that you qualify and that whatever you have is a gross, maybe for 2 years, you have to just put yourself maybe on a quarterly, tax payment option so that those numbers are showing, because whatever you pay Uncle Sam is what we use as income.
Gotcha. So,
Yeah.
so you're
And
talking,
that's really big.
Yeah, so you're talking strategy.
Yeah,
so
it really is.
So I'm looking at if I'm going to purchase it in the next 2 years, now I have to have a conversation around how much do I want to have show up as a W-2
Absolutely.
so I can qualify.
Correct.
Okay.
That's qualification purposes.
That's good.
And that and let let your CPA know what your plans are.
Right.
Because they will talk to you on how to strategize that.
Right. And then also I think, part of the reason I want to have you come through is because, as I've told you guys all the time, you need different lenders for different things. Because there are some people who that's all they deal with is people who have like self-employed and all that. And then there are people who do different, more traditional, whatever it may be. And so having several in your portfolio is critical because different lenders like different things.
Right.
Yeah.
And as we're talking about different lenders, it's also important because another pool of lenders are private lenders.
Correct.
That, I have seen a lot where people go to private lenders for, whatever their work is. The one thing I will say is if you have a private lender, you're working with a private lender, you need to sit down and speak to someone within finance to understand your exit plan.
Yes.
Because the hardest part is sitting with people and they look like you and I. and they're like, you know what, we worked on a flip, we ran out of
Yep.
money. You know, the private lender a lot of times might be asking for 3 to 4 points up front. That means that if it's a house that's $500,000, they're looking for a point is a percent.
Right.
So one, like 4% of that money you paid into it.
Right.
You're paying them interest that can be between 10 and 14% a month. And literally, I'm looking at the account like they're just wiped out.
Right.
But when they come back and sit in front of me, because a lot of times it's people who are self-employed.
Right.
You were self-employed and your income situation when you went with the private lender hasn't changed. So I still can't qualify you.
Right.
That is, to me, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's really understanding that, yes, once again, it's the process. There is a quick fix out of it, right? Sometimes they're like, I'll go with the private lender. Or sometimes they'll say to me, Cheryl, do you know private lenders? I'll say, absolutely, I do. And they'll say, can I have that number? And I'll say, absolutely not.
You ain't seen
Because you're not ready
Yeah,
yet,
you're
you
right.
know? And I said, and I know at the end of the day, I need to sleep at night.
Right.
I don't want you to come back to me to say, hey, you gave me this person.
Right.
You knew I wasn't prepared. And now, you know, you're in a position
Right.
where you literally lose not just your house, but once again, the amount of work that it takes for us to save. Like, it's not like we have a trust set up for us.
Right.
So what you had to go through to save that money, to put it into a home, and now it's all gone, and you're starting from scratch.
Right.
Like, it's difficult. So if you're saying, okay, what's the game plan? And that's usually what I ask, like, what's your exit strategy before I give you
Yes.
this number?
Yeah.
Because they're going to do what they do.
Right.
Like, they'll give you the money.
But
You know, they will
yeah.
give you the money. They will. They're basically a private bank.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the parameters that they have are not the parameters
Totally
of the
different.
bank.
Totally different.
It's a whole different world.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that you understand what that exit strategy looks like for you.
Yeah, and then that's why we've had different people in our show. So we've had somebody like Cheryl, more conditional. We had John Foligno, who was a mortgage broker. So he represented a number of different sources he can get money to. Then we've had hard money lenders, and you need all of them in your portfolio so of lenders based off of your strategy. So based off what I'm trying to get done. So I may come to a private person because I need speed to get something done, but I still got to come back to somebody like you
Right.
to get out of that.
To get out of those high interest rates.
Yeah. Because
Right.
usually, because if we're talking hard money, it's only, depending on the size of the project.
Right.
But really,
Short
you're
term.
trying to 9 months, 12 months,
Correct, at
maybe
the most.
Yeah, at the most. Believe me, you ain't trying to be longer than that. And so that's why I like to have the connection. Okay, I need you to meet Cheryl now. And if you're looking at starting some things around fixing and flipping, you need to talk to her about what are some things you're looking for. So if I do go this route,
Correct.
I can come out. Or are there programs, because I know there's some like smaller banks have more flexibility where they may be able to even fund
Correct.
some of those things and then help you go from that program and then to another one. So so that would be something I'm interested in having you talk about if that's what you guys do. But part of what you want to do is, like I said, having multiple money relationships. And then have someone like her that you can call, say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Because the earlier we can get you in, the better off, because you can help us think through some things clearly.
Right. It's really about strategy,
Yeah.
and that's what I say. It's and just be upfront with me, because the last thing I want is to create, I say to people, I'm kind of like a financial attorney in a sense, right? Let me know what's going on
Yeah.
so that I can create the files so that we can get done what needs to get done,
Right.
so sometimes I've found it's interesting where people say, yeah, it's a single family, and I'll send an appraiser out, and it's just like the appraiser's calling, like, hey, what happened? There's a whole kitchen set up in the basement along with, there's
Yeah.
somebody renting it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you didn't
Yeah.
tell me that part. So just be upfront. Let us know, we're here to assist.
Yeah.
We will say, like, you can't
do
do that.
that. You can't
That's
do that.
illegal. You can't do that.
But that's my mama.
Yeah, exactly.
My cousin.
Absolutely.
They're like,
yeah.
no, we can't do that.
Yeah, we can't do that. So, so that it's just really understanding that the people who are in front of you are there to assist.
Right. And I think that keeps you, having these different relationships because we've had appraisers come through. I haven't, not recently, but, I've tried to introduce our network to all these different phases of, these the different banking and money things, because you need to have a wide range of relationships and perspectives as you're going through this. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so talk to us about FHA. That's one of the programs that a lot of people go through to get started. So can you walk us through what that means, how it works,
Yeah.
so on and so forth?
So Federal Housing Association program, it's a government-funded program. With FHA, you're able to put 3.5% down
Right.
to get into homes. So for single families, 2 or for 3 families. Typically, once you get into a 3 or 4 family, you need to have reserves. Reserves are basically your monthly payment, your principal, your interest, private mortgage insurance, and principal interest, and your real estate. That makes up your monthly payment.
Right.
So with FHA, you need to have, if you're doing a 3 to 4 family, you need to have 3 to 6 months, really 3 months reserves for that
Okay.
program. So that is typically, so that's a government-backed program. So that's what
It's a government what?
government backing, which
Okay,
means
okay,
that,
okay.
right, so which means that the financing from that is funded through the government. So
Right.
they've created that program. One of the great things at Bristol County that we have, and this is a term that many banks have, that's what you call portfolio programs.
Okay.
Portfolio programs are banks that decided, okay, I'm going to create these programs for first-time home buyers. They stay within the bank. So you can walk into a branch, you can walk into a bank and pay it there. It doesn't get sold. The funding is from the bank. So we actually, as a bank, also have some programs that are only 3% down.
Okay.
3%
Say that
down.
one time. How much?
3.
Okay.
3%.
Y'all hear me now?
Yeah.
Three. What's that? 3.
3% down.
Nice.
It is. It really is great. So those are some of the programs that we offer
Nice.
also that internally are what you call portfolio. The great thing about those programs is, as a bank, my underwriting team is within the bank.
That's nice.
So I can email them, I can speak to them, I can contact them to see and have an explanation of what happens. Sometimes those underwritings are outsourced.
Right.
And you really are not able to communicate with them as freely as you would, within our bank.
Right.
So that is an area that's really important, is finding out which bank and what they offer. So for me, that was one of the reasons why I went to Bristol County Savings Bank, not only because they were moving into the Providence County, but I realized that they put money aside for down payment assistance.
Right.
But also, they had several programs that assisted homeowners to get into homes at 3% down, and then they're offering the 3% as a down payment.
Wow.
So I'll give
Say
you
that
a scenario.
Back up. Put that in reverse. Say that one more time.
So I will give you a scenario of someone that I just
Wow.
recently closed.
That's huge.
That it was a mother and her daughter. They were doing 3% down program. The mother had the income, had the credit. And the grandmother did not have credit because everything was cash paid.
Right.
She had so when I put in her social, there was no credit score.
Wow.
So, but I was able to use her income.
Right. Okay.
So I didn't have to create. Typically, you would have to create with other banks. You would have to create a history.
Okay.
So with that, I didn't have to, and I used them. They received $20,000 as down payment assistance.
Okay.
I was able to use both incomes to qualify,
Right.
which meant they were able to get into a house because I couldn't do it with just one income.
Okay.
Even though the second person had no credit. It wasn't bad credit. There's a difference.
It was non-existent.
It was non-existent.
Non-existent, yeah.
Right? And a lot of the population, that I deal with, they just don't, because everything's cash paid. They didn't have the credit. But I was able to use the credit from the daughter.
The daughter, exactly.
And the income, so both incomes, and then they were able to use the down payment assistance. And they would I was beyond thrilled
100%,
because
yeah.
that was the purpose of why, I transitioned to this bank, to know that, okay, there's programs that are able to assist our community.
And I think that's why I think I wanted to have you on is looking at some of the smaller banks. You can navigate
Absolutely.
some things a little easier, so I can actually call you or come see you.
Correct.
And then you can actually go and talk to about, hey, why wasn't this person approved, or what do we need to tweak, or whatever else.
What do we need to do?
You know, because sometimes the smaller you are, the more flexible and faster you can move.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know, and so I think
also
that's a benefit.
that's a huge benefit, and because it's a portfolio, they create their own guidelines
Right.
that the other banks don't offer.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, so as long as it's within the guidelines, they're like, okay, that's fine.
Because
We'll fund it.
Yeah, you just dropped the nugget, because sometimes, guys, when y'all hanging out talking to us anyway.
Yeah.
A portfolio sort of loan or bank, they're keeping it. But when you're doing like FHA, I'm not
Right.
banking, so I'm asking you this question.
Yep.
Is there are certain parameters because they want to sell it? Am I
Correct.
right in saying that?
Yep. No, you're absolutely correct
Okay,
in saying
okay.
that. So that's why sometimes you're able to close on a loan, and then as soon as you close, by the next month, someone's contacting you to say, you need to make your payments here.
Yeah,
So-
and sometimes they'll keep the servicing aspect of it.
Correct.
But they've sold the loan.
The loan went somewhere else,
Yeah.
which the funding goes somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
See, that's why I get smart people around me so I can learn. I just let y'all hang out with us.
It's really an interesting process
Oh
when
my
you get
goodness.
it so much.
Yeah. And so much of it is we don't know it.
Yeah, we don't know it.
And we're, like I was on that podcast earlier, and when I was talking to the woman, I said, we're just ignorant. Not stupid.
Yeah.
It's just that, because actually the question she asked me, this, Cheryl, was this. She said, what do you think is one of the biggest reasons why Black and brown people are behind financially? And I said, obviously you can't throw everybody under one thing because everybody ain't the same.
Correct.
But I said one of the big things I found out is that it's the flow of information is different. Where we're getting one conversation here, but then behind the scenes they're like, well, if you come over here, I can get you this pro. It's just very different, and so now I think that's changed because you can go online and sometimes it ain't right, but
No, you're absolutely right.
but in many respects the walls are torn down between what we can find out. Now we got to go do some digging and then come see people like you who can say, all right, is this real? As opposed to just go
Absolutely.
running with it. But it's just the information that we are not getting that will help us to navigate this wealth gap or whatever else. The phrase that's probably popular that people use is bridging the wealth gap. Is information, and so I'm like, I don't know anything about a portfolio. I don't know anything about somebody putting down 3%. I have no what's FHA. I don't know any of these things.
Correct. Right.
Why should I have credit cards? Why should I have debt? All these are conversations that are not being had.
Correct. So even for myself, I mean, one of my roles, is really to go into agencies and offer, first-time home buyer courses, right? So we can do those. But before we do that, I take a step back.
Right.
Let's talk about just different accounts. What's a checking? What's a savings?
Yeah.
What's a CD? What's an IRA? Let's talk about what that portfolio. Let's talk about another class, which would be credit.
Right.
What are
is
those
credit?
scores?
Yeah.
What is credit?
What is credit?
Right? What are those three institutions? What defines that? What
Right.
defines, how they create credit? So that's another course that I teach. So for me, it's literally the power in education.
Correct.
Because before you get into a home ownership, you need to understand, that
better.
whole part of it
You better.
is that there's certain things that we are just not privy to.
Right.
It was just, it was lack of information, and that has also changed because
Yeah.
cash is no longer king.
Right.
So understanding that what that looks like is important.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, that's good. Any more questions out there? Okay. So we've talked about the home ownership from perspective of people who are first-time home buyers, and you hit it a little bit, but I do want to go back to it. So because many of the people in the room who here are investors, many of the people who are watching us, we have a lot of people who watch us or they watch us later on. They're coming from that; they're investors as well. So How does your bank work with investors? Do you guys work with investors? So talk a little bit, or is that not your department? So fill us in on that a
Right.
little bit.
So I handle the residential
Okay.
area. So residential for most banks are single to 4 family.
Okay.
Anything beyond that goes into the commercial lending
Commercial side,
space.
right?
And every time I'm always speaking to certain commercial lenders because a lot of the population that I serve is also Latin American, so they all speak Spanish. So some of them I have to translate, and
They're pulling you in.
yeah, they pull me in, which is great because I'm also learning,
Right.
a lot of what's required.
Right.
But one of the biggest hurdles, I think, for many people for some commercial items is the down payment.
Okay.
We're not looking at 3% anymore.
No, you're not.
You're looking at, it might be 10, but most of the time it's like
More,
20%,
yeah,
20 to
yeah,
25%.
yeah.
That's a huge amount of money. That is a
Yeah,
huge amount of
exactly.
money, which is when you look, at those spaces, there's very few of us in that because
Right.
of the capital.
Right.
We lack that capital to be
Right.
able to come up with that.
Right.
But I do know that some people, what they do is, they might go in with someone else.
Yeah, the partnership.
And do a partnership in that part of it.
Yeah.
Those
Those are critical.
Yeah, those are extremely critical in understanding that you're not on an island alone. Somebody else also has the same dream that you have. And if you begin with that and pull your money together, then you can move forward, right?
You just said something that I've heard 3 times on this show when we started this year, and the guy was like, he said, Dexter, the bigger the deals get, the more people pool their money. And I
Absolutely.
think in our community, so much of what we think about is I have to bring my own money to the table.
Correct.
Now, sometimes you got to pray. I think a lot of times you have to put some in because people want to know if you got some skin in the game.
You gotta have some skin, yeah, absolutely.
But I think this mindset of I have to have it myself is something that we're going to have to shift.
Yeah, I think
Because-
that's a huge shift.
Yeah, that is a huge shift because you don't necessarily have to have the money, as I'm talking to people who deal with more on the multifamily side.
Correct,
And
yeah.
so they're looking at 100 units, 200 units, 500 units.
Absolutely.
And they're looking at partnerships and they're looking at raising capital and all that. And so those are just different ways of thinking and paradigms. And so I've had to even step back myself and look at, okay, Dexter, what does that look like? Obviously you have to get in partnership with people who are like-minded and so on and so forth.
That part.
And that takes time.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we jump into partnerships too quick.
Absolutely.
And then you look like, I don't like you. Or they think differently than you do.
Absolutely.
I may not have the same morals and values, but I think the bigger we go and the more that we strive to do, partnerships are well, they ain't talking about now that collaboration is the new capital. That the more we can collaborate, the more we can get done and move forward, And so, thank you for saying that.
But I mean, if you think of it, right? If you think like of the times before where the concept of the village,
Right.
that village concept we moved away from, where everyone plays a role to have the village move forward.
Correct.
We've become just more, like you say, just self-sufficient. How do I go about doing it ourselves? Where, if you were part of a village, then you knew who you needed to go to and who you needed to collaborate with to get certain things done. And
Correct.
it was done, and it was like a trade.
Right.
You might have a little bit more collateral than I do, but I have the credit.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So together we can move
Right.
forward.
Or the time.
Right? Or the time.
Or the time, yeah.
That part. Yeah.
The time.
Right? Or,
Yeah.
just different
Yeah.
things. Sometimes it's not just the capital.
Right.
Sometimes it is. A lot of it is the time, or the credit, So
Or the relationships.
Or the relationships.
Because if I can make 1 or 2 phone calls and get you to
Correct.
somebody,
Right.
what is that worth to you?
Correct.
So
It's really going back to that village, the concept of it takes a village. A lot of times you do need that village to allow you to get to that vision that you have.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
understand you're not on it and you're not in it by yourself.
the last question, because we're wrapping up. Where are you seeing people buy?
So let me just back up about that part of it. So I still see people purchasing
Right.
in different areas. But definitely within, the Providence County, people are purchasing.
Okay.
And one of the things that people, will often say is, like for Rhode Island, because that's where the majority of my market is, where within Providence, is what are we doing with the interest rates? What are we doing with, the home prices?
Okay.
And those parts we can't control.
At all.
Right? It literally, I don't know if many of you have heard that, but the concept of like, just date the rate,
Yes.
and marry the house, right? So you have the house, that is long term, but the rate, we can all refinance at some
Right.
point in time. But I think of it from a larger, area.
Right.
So from a countrywide, if you look at the list of the most expensive places to live in, we're in Rhode Island, but it's always California on that top, like 4 or 5.
Okay.
There's always, Massachusetts is there, and it's always New York.
Correct.
Rhode Island is literally 2.5 hours away from New York
Right.
and an hour away from the Boston area.
Correct.
So a lot of people that I deal with will say like, wow, it's just really expensive. But I find that there's so many people from Boston. I have so many people who have actually come from New York because one of the things that COVID created was remote work. I've
That's a
actually
game changer. That's
I
a
have
game
pre-approved
changer.
people from
Yeah.
California
Game changer.
who literally have to go into work once a month. They said it's cheaper to purchase anywhere around here, whether it's Connecticut, whether it's in Mass, and then still fly out once a month,
yeah.
get a hotel,
Yep.
and it is here.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we have to look at the spectrum from the countrywide, not
good.
just within our
Yeah,
state.
that's good. Yeah.
Because we look at it and we look at, wow, what does it cost?
Yeah.
And the cost has changed so much, whether you're buying in Boston, whether it's in Rhode Island, whether it's Connecticut. But I'm like, but if you look at the countrywide,
Right.
what does that look like?
And then I think
you know,
and you look at the countrywide, and then like you said, people's lifestyles.
And
man. I
lifestyles.
remember talking to a guy, and he was like, "Dexter, I have to work 4 days." He said, "No, this is what he said. I have to be in the office 4 days a month." And I was like, "Okay." I'm like, "That's just 1 day a week." He said, "No. Listen to what I said. 4 days a month. So I could take for 1 week and go in Monday, Tuesday,
Yeah.
Wednesday, Thursday, and spend the other 26 days wherever."
Wherever.
And I was like, "Oh my God!" This is
Right.
not- you know,
That
'cause
literally opens up.
so it goes back to
That-
the point of that opens the world up for me because he was like,
So,
"Man, I want
right.
to live in Costa Rica. I want to do." I'm like, "Wow."
Correct.
And so.
So the times,
yeah, exactly.
it's changed so much because
Yeah.
people used to purchase within the vicinity of traveling.
Right.
Right? I just want to travel an hour, 2 hours. That's not the case anymore.
Right.
So when you're looking around, you're
good.
competing with people from across the country.
True.
Because now their work has totally changed the concept and changed the way life is now.
If you got an internet connection and Zoom,
You're out of the country. You're in Costa Rica, like you said.
Google Meetup,
Yeah.
you could work
You could do absolutely.
anywhere, and
Absolutely.
and still, my wife works at TJX at least for the time being, and she was like they were really big on making people come into the office, and then they found that they were just as profitable or more profitable people working at home.
Absolutely.
And so now there's like,
Because you
the
have that
cat's out the
fear.
bag. You ain't got that. So I don't have to commute, get on the train, and do all that crazy, and still we still making money as a company.
We're still making money,
Oh,
but
my
also
goodness.
think about the money that they're saving overhead
Yeah.
to actually have a
Daycare
physical
and-
address.
yeah, exactly.
As
Yeah.
a company, so in Providence, what's happening is a lot of, because of remote work, a lot of, and I'm sure it's the same thing in downtown Boston, a lot of those places are being turned into condos. So there's a lot of condos, a lot of homes.
Right.
So it's no longer commercial spaces anymore.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the way or what I think larger corporations are
Correct.
grappling with. Okay, well, what do we do with these huge buildings that we had
For years.
Yeah, for years.
Yeah. And
What
we've
do we
leased
do?
them for years. We have contracts.
Yeah, exactly. I know the city of Boston. I know Michelle Wu was trying to do some things around. Trying to do some things downtown with turn them into residential areas and things of that nature because of you got all these buildings down there. Like, okay, what do we do with them?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I say to everyone, everyone has a time and a moment. So focused on your why.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes it's scary listening to the news and the rates and but it is a lot.
It can be a lot.
It's a lot. It's overwhelming. But the reality is that the time is when it's supposed to be for you. So if that time
Yeah,
is now and you're ready now, then financially,
Yeah,
you have your
yeah.
things in place to move forward.
Yeah, and I think that's my message to people a lot of times is, even if it comes to sessions like this, like we do our conference, which we do on April 4th and 5th this year. And I said, you're in an individual race. Don't look at what I'm doing or what Cheryl is doing or what Vanessa's doing. You will know when it's time to execute for you.
Correct.
You just will. We went to these sessions for, well, not that long, but a couple years. And then I just knew in my heart it was time to move. Mm-hmm. And we had got some things together, and we took our home equity line of credit and some other things, and then we moved out. And so I think what you can do is you can fall into the sin of comparison, where you're looking, particularly if you look on this thing right here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, everybody's flexing on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. Oh, I just moved into my house, and then, well, you don't know they ain't got no furniture in that joint. Or they eating cat food. I can say, I should have said that.
Right,
They eating tuna.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, they eating tuna. But, oh my God, I'm flexing. Stop it. Listen, y'all, this wealth building, real estate wealth creation thing is an individual race. And as long as you can continue to get better and better and get the information and take steps when you're ready, because like I said, we sold a house for $600,000. I'm hoping these ladies can keep this house, because it's what, in particular, people like us. And I said this years ago. I said we are sometimes very good at getting things,
Correct.
but not keeping them.
Correct.
Watch
Maintaining
this, and then passing it on.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I met your husband, one of the things we talked about offline was, he said, yeah, my mother-in-law left us some property, and then you were talking about, what to do with it. But that is also what we're trying to do. We want to make sure that when we get these things, we want to keep maintain them, help them, have them appreciate, and then how do we pass it on in a most efficient manner? Because my dad passed last year, and I went through probate. That wasn't the most efficient way to pass it on. If anybody's ever been through that process, believe me.
I'm there now.
You right there now? Woo! Dude, I could do a whole class on that alone, just of, wills and estates, because that's one thing I want to do at 25 is, get some of this estate planning stuff together, because I'm seeing that's a hole in our community. But it was like, OMG. So when I first called an estate lawyer, and he said, yeah, it's going to cost you about $25,000 to probate business. I'm like, you ain't going to do that. Yeah, it was about $25,000. Which could have been easily avoided with some paperwork and some information. So so sometimes we just, back to the information thing, we just don't know. And it ends up costing us, and then, thank God my wife and I had some resources that we could do that. But we kept saying over and over again, Cheryl, what do people do who don't have money?
They lose it.
Yeah, thank you. So if you don't have money to go through these things,
right, you don't.
You end up, really in a lot of respects, you end up, selling on the. I'm not trying to be. You end up selling on the low.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times how many people, hey, Mr. Jenkins, you want to sell the house? I'm like, well, no, my wife and I are going to keep it and do X, Y, and Z. Because I recognize that there is multi-generational wealth tied up in what we're trying to do. But if we didn't have the information, we didn't have the money, the resources, and the connections to go through all of that process to go forward, we end up not being able to do what you said. You start Proverbs 13:22, leaving the inheritance for our children. That goes out the window.
It does. And I think the other part of, as you're talking about that is let people know what you're interested in doing. Because sometimes you don't realize that really God has sent that answer.
100%.
And it could be the person just sitting right next to you. But because we don't share,
right,
and we feel like, it's mine, it's just our own, and of course use wisdom, right, when
Correct.
doing that. And I'll just share a quick story. I was at an event, and we were there was a small business or a person who had a business, and they were interested in making soaps and lotions and things of that nature. So typically, sometimes I help, or I will judge certain, small business situations. Right. So she says, yeah, I'm having an issue with, I was like, well, what's your biggest challenge? She said, finding someone with B, like a B, she needed somewhere to get her B resources. I was like, oh, I'm thinking, I don't know anyone. The guy standing right next to me was like, oh, I know all about bees. I looked at him, suit and all, like, bees? He was like, I know how to harvest them. I know all about bees. My whole family got tired of me sending gifts of bees because I knew everything about it. But it literally came from just a conversation of saying, you know what, this is what I need. Do you know anyone?
Wow.
You know, I didn't, but the person I was standing next to knew like the whole rundown. Literally, it was a 2-second. Here's a phone number. Here's the information. Give them a call. Tell them I sent you.
Right. Yeah. Wow. You know, so and that's part of why we started doing these.
Exactly.
Because your answer is in the room.
It's always
Or even if it's not in this room, it's in some room. You know, and
Someone's
so,
there
yeah,
to
so
be able
as you
to
get into
assist.
the rooms, you can do that. So we have 1 minute left because my wife's giving me the one side. We got 1 minute left. So Cheryl, can you look into that camera and let them know how they can, first of all, how they can find you, whether you do any social media type of stuff, but then definitely how they can contact you if they want to go forward with you in anything. So.
Sure. So my contact information, my cell number is 617-719-6972. My email address is cheryl.galloway@bcsbmail.com. It's actually on the screen. Once again, the phone number and the contact is area code 617-719-6972.
Yep. Social media at all? You LinkedIn a little bit?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I think it's Galloway Cheryl
Yeah.
Galloway. I'm still trying to navigate those spaces.
Well,
That's where my kids come in. You know?
but they know I'm a big social media guy. You need to be on LinkedIn, particularly LinkedIn if nothing else. Definitely
Right.
be on
LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I have them
Cheryl
all.
Galloway across
Cheryl Galloway,
Okay.
across all of them.
All right, y'all. That is it. So welcome. Welcome. Bye. We will see y'all in January. Be blessed. Bye-bye.
Yay.
Good job.
Great job.
Thank you.
You see.